So I'll share my screen and describe the problem. Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to, yeah, if you can share your screen.
Yeah. So this is the issue I'm working on. So when you add an so when you promote a comment to a timeline event, you get a toast message, and we're going to add view event to the toast message, which seems straightforward enough. Sorry. So then an example of that is here is a comment. You press this button to add it to the timeline, and we get this. So the way the toast message works is the first problem or interesting thing. So to add the action, you can run an on click. So you can't make that action a link, but you can give it an on click behavior in which you could replace the window like URLs, which feels a little bit clunky. And I couldn't find any other examples of us. Well, I found one example of us using window.location replace in the code base. So I don't love this. And also, the action is an anchor tag anyway. So I feel like we should be able to add a link to that anchor tag. So this is one issue I have. Maybe I want to speak to this for now.
Yeah, I'm surprised you can't add an href on there. Does, but I know that the event shows up on a separate tab, right, of that same page.
Yeah,
So
and
it's
we've
not
only
that we,
just created the URL, the routing, so
okay.
that it can be done. It's
Do
not
we
even merged yet.
got it? So if you do location replace, this doesn't do a whole new page reload. This will actually view router will take over.
Oh, interesting. I was just going to do a whole new page,
But maybe
and
maybe
it's going to
that's
work.
It depends. Like if your whole page is routed with Vue, you should probably use Vue router and navigate to this.
Yeah.
If the page is, still using single Rails views, you probably want to, we have a helper for that. You would
Mhm.
do like go there. It's also ugly that it's in a JavaScript, but yeah.
So
So
it's now using Vue router, or it will be as soon as the MR is merged. But yeah, anyway, it's going to use the Vue router, and that'll be fine.
I
But
think
also,
it's
I don't understand how this action store works, but that's a slightly different
oh
thing,
Jesus,
right?
yeah.
oh, just let it live. It's gonna
Just
it's
So,
doing its thing. I would
yeah.
then just add a comment either on the MR or here that
Mhm.
test that once the view router stuff test this behavior with the view router thing. So does changing the URL will view router just take over and do its thing? And
Mhm.
I wouldn't I I feel like there's a 50-50 chance it does either one. And there might be
That will work because
okay,
I just did that.
that's
Yeah, I
cool.
just
That's
made
cool.
that
So
work.
my question was, I don't know if we need to do like a
Yeah.
push state versus a replace or like something like that. I don't know exactly.
But this sort of clunky behavior is okay.
I think
Like
so, especially
replace or
because,
push. Yeah.
well, I wonder if on data,
Hmm.
should we get the URL of the,
That's my next question. Yeah.
yeah.
So I think with Vue
So on
router,
data, we get, oh,
it's,
sorry.
it's probably better with Vue router if you can push the state or whatever, however you do it. It's better than an URL because of all the things that can go wrong with creating a URL here, and but I think that isn't this like how our file list view works as well? I mean, we're properly using Vue router there, so if you can use the Vue router API, just do it. I mean, the alternative would be that we teach the toast function how to do Vue router stuff, like on a top level, so to have it a bit nicer. But yeah, I don't know.
That's a really
But
good point.
ideally, if we're going to change the toast information, then we'll just make it like it's already a anchor tag. We'll just give it the URL to go to.
Right? View router knows how to can handle anchor tags. Like, you have a special anchor thing.
Oh, okay, yeah, sure.
And so I think that's might be what's going on with the fileless thing. But the fileless one is a good example to bring up that's doing something similar.
But to be honest, if you look and using, I think you wouldn't use an a ref anchor whatever because you would use the view router component, and under the hood this is nothing different from calling the view router API, right? Whether you call the JavaScript API or there's like some faux component that does the same thing under the hood. The only thing that I might see would be worthwhile if we have that use case more often of a toast, doing something with view router, which might be the use case once we have more stuff that uses view router. It might also to write a little helper that is, toast with view router action, or, toast with view router that abstracts the little hack that you're doing here, so yeah, that it works. Because the downside of teaching the toasts how view router works is we would need to bring view router as a dependency into GitLab UI and teach it all these kind of things, right? Which might be tricky if you need to update view router in the future or replace it with, I don't know, the next shiny front end routing thing.
That makes sense. And like the other reason why I thought it'd be much better as a link is because like the way it works is, like you get view event and this looks like a link. So I should be able to like command click and open it in a new tab, but I can't if it's an on click.
Yeah, you can. You could look at the event and look if a meta button is clicked.
Okay, yeah, I guess so. Yeah, that's true.
I mean, this is just obviously you're right. The best, most accessible thing would be if you actually use the if you can make it an ahref, but it would have the downside that if it's a normal link and you click it, view router would not do view router, and so you wouldn't be able to switch over in the single page application, and you would force a reload. Right.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. That makes sense. Cool. I think that's some options that I can investigate. I want to show you the next problem, which is like when you get the data, it has the ID of the new timeline event, but that ID is like the I don't know how to describe it. Like it says, so the GraphQL gives us back like the timeline event ID, which I don't know how to turn that into a URL. So like when we create the so this is the service to promote the timeline event to a node, and we say like it gives this information. What I would like to do is add like I think what I would like to do is add like a timeline event link, and then I'd like it to build that link because we have the ID, and I guess we need to give some service in Rails the ID in order to get the path.
Yeah, there's a number of ways I think we could do this. We can let the front end be the single source of truth of it, and let's the front end build the URL. Or we can let the back end be the single source of truth, but let the back end do it. The front end one would be potentially easier because you can effectively just create a new URL from the current one, just change the current path so that we can go to the timeline, which I don't know if that's like up a level or whatever, but you could do a relative path. I find using the all caps URL, the native URL object, is really, really helpful at like creating new URLs that are relative to other URLs.
So that would look like, so here when we create the so when we create, and then we So this should pause in the console. So we have, this is the ID we get.
Yeah, so we'd have to take out the GraphQL decorations of that ID if we wanted to do it from here. Or
So we'd
if
have to like take this string, manually cut out the number, and then
except
build
we
a
have
URL
helpers to
with this
do
number.
that. Um
Okay, cool.
I believe. Uh I believe we have helpers to do that. Uh and it's also maybe we have instead of on the type just an ID, maybe we have an IID, and that's what we should be using. Instead, because that would be just the 68 part. But I don't know if that exists for these kind of things.
Is the timeline event already a thing in GraphQL? Or is this also new in this merge request?
Yeah, it is.
Type timeline event type. They have an ID, event tags, promoted from node incident.
It doesn't have an IID. Doesn't look like it does.
No.
All right.
Yeah,
I
this is
yeah, I think we'll need to grab a there should be a function that's like convert from GraphQL ID. If we do a project wide search for like from G dot star ID, we might find something. Um, get ID. There we go. There's one. Get ID from GraphQL ID.
oh yeah, cool. Oh great. Okay, that makes sense. Well, I'll do it in the front end. That's way more simple.
The question is just like with the timeline event type, and if they now get like whatever IDs, or if they get like an URL or whatever, the question would be if we should just expose it on the GraphQL type as well, right? Like just thinking about the API, about our GraphQL API, is there the use case where someone wants the URL from this thing? I don't know.
Yeah.
Or is the URL not existent at that point?
Yeah.
I feel like it would make sense.
Yeah. Just like, I mean, as a first iteration, the front end thing is probably good enough. And, but, I don't know which backend developer is helping with those features. You could ask him, hey, could we expose whatever field we need here? And then it becomes even easier in the future.
Yeah.
Sweet. Yep, that's useful. I think I can go from there. Thanks so much.
Let me share one more thing about URLs doing this from the front end. If you go to the actual, you have the site running, I think. Yeah, you can go ahead and press play through this or whatever. So I did talk about using the native all caps URL object to easily create relative URLs, because if I'm in this view, I'll want to take them to the timeline view and add an anchor tag where we jump them to it.
Yep.
Ideally something like that. Well, because I'm realizing summary,
just for extra information, this branch is based on the branch that already has the
got it.
router in.
So my question
that's why the
is,
router works.
I don't know if I added on our Zoom chat. I don't know if doing a relative we're going to timeline is always going to work nicely, because what if here's the situation that you might want to figure out. When I add a comment to the timeline, while that's loading, I navigate to metrics or something. And so now I'm on a different level of nesting in the URL than I was in summary.
Right.
So we'll just want, when we build the URL, rather than building it off of like window location href, we might want to find something stable to build it off of. You know what I'm saying?
You would probably build it not in the on-click event, but outside of the on-click event.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. That's a great idea. Yeah.
Like you would build the URL at the time. Yeah. Oh shoot! I also messed up in the chat. Like you would need to build it before, right? Yeah, timeline, and then you would do URL dot. Is it just hash? I think it's just hash, right?
Yeah.
Hash.
But we could use window location href. I mean, it might be interesting if it might, because maybe there's other URLs where you can create this from if we had a stable incident path that we got from the backend. Like maybe that's the most reliable thing for us to do.
Yeah.
So rather, but yeah, all of it to say, I shared also in the chat, James, I shared a link to this toast function, and I'm surprised that href isn't a thing, because I would, if I saw that, I would immediately start wanting to middle click the thing, the view event, because I imagine someone might be trying to go through a list of them and then it's like, oh, let me middle click this. I don't want to lose my current context, but this wouldn't let me middle click on it. So
I also maybe a GitLab UI issue.
yeah, exactly. So I think I could see us wanting to add an href here.
I also don't understand why this is a splice and not an unshift, because nodes.splice00 is so confusing. You just add something at the and the whole render title thing, like, why is it so complicated? Like, I don't know.
I didn't even put together the splice 00. That's interesting. Yeah, this is that's
just adding at the beginning of the array.
That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah. So that's not obviously not something that needs to be done right away, but that could make your other MR easier. Just things to think about.
Cool. Yeah. Yes, thanks.
Cool.
Do I stop sharing? Do you want to move on to next topic?
Yeah, let's do it. Do you want me to share my screen IP, or do you want to share it?
Sure. So my wife is going to come soon and I have to drop off eventually. But I just have one main point in that merge request. Maybe we can jump into that one quickly.
Cool. Let's do it. Let me share my screen and close some things out. And yeah, let's go for it. Here we go. Sharing screen. Oh wait, this is GitLab UI. Get out of here, GitLab UI. Yeah. All right. Yes. What's the point?
So the point is about the URLs. If you go to changes, maybe I should share my screen real quick.
Oh, you're good. I'm here in changes.
Okay. So the parse package name. So this is the thing. The parse package name is a little interesting because apparently after the initial part of the name, right, like the beginning here, Lodash or GitLab untamper, there is an add, and after that add comes an URI. And the thing with the npm that you're doing, that you're basically converting that sole number into that alias kind of thing, is interesting, but I think it's maybe the wrong approach in in the whole thing is looking at the thing a little bit backwards. I think it would probably make more sense in the Yarn versus 2 strategy to be like, hey, let's parse this thing, this name and the resolution thing. And the only thing that we support is workspace, where we're just like, okay, we don't care. And NPM, where we are like, okay, we need to double check that everything looks all right and no one has done something bad. And I think we also need to support like the patch URI scheme.
Yeah.
Because this is what they do to TypeScript and a few other packages to make them npm compatible. And potentially in the future, and this is also something that Untamper currently doesn't support at all, but you could also have the Git and the HTTPS URI schemes if you get your packages from elsewhere. Yeah.
So the intent here is, for some reason, the NPA was parsing this. If I had something that looked like this, it tried to treat 4.1.7 as the package name. Did that make sense? So that's why that's why I changed it to this so that NPA would not
Yes.
freak out when it found this part.
Let me just 1 second.
Yeah, you're good. Man, I was afraid of offending IP, but I could tell he was really upset with my last comment. He just stormed out of the room. I'm joking.
So,
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend you so much, IP. I'm joking.
No, all good. So I think there's a little confusion here. So imagine.
Is that
It's my daughter.
that's what I was hoping
Clara,
it
komm
was.
mal bitte her. Komm her, Clara. Nimm sie mal bitte, Anna. Martin ist im wichtigen Call. Okay, good. So I think there's just a little confusion here because NPM has also a feature to do aliases. So for example, if you do, if you want to install Vue2 and Vue3, you can write Vue2 at npm :vue at. And
Right.
this looks the same as this resolution thing here, but actually isn't. So
Okay.
if you would think, let's imagine that Yarn versus 2 would have chosen not npm but Yarn versus 2 as a name space. The resolution would, for example, look like Yarn 47021. I'm just writing it in the chat. While an npm alias that you actually give to npa would look like something like this. Lodash. Let me just. Vue2 is the best example. Vue2, Yarn, Vue at. Which version of Vue do we have? I don't know. 2.710 or whatever, right? So
Yep.
No,
yep.
I wrote the wrong thing. Sorry again.
Well, I think the pre-existing alias behavior makes sense.
Yeah.
My thoughts was in interpreting this was that Yarn2 is just, I don't know, for some reason assuming that an empty alias meant just use the same name. But I do think you're making a good point of like conceptually Yarn resolutions are just seemingly a little bit different than what this expects of its package name at URI. And I think that makes sense.
So like so you might have done the right thing here. So basically you change the npm thing where they also have done a shortcut into the full qualified URL kind of thing. Maybe to put it differently, I think if you have a package JSON in mind, right? A package JSON has on the left-hand side Lodash and on the right-hand side 41721, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the @npm : here that we have is basically just like the normal colon in the package JSON.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying? Like, it's just like conceptually, it's a little bit interesting. And I think because we have the patch shenanigans going on anyhow, we probably need to rework the Yarn versus 2 strategy a little bit.
That makes sense.
To also give better errors if we encounter an unknown protocol. Because imagine Yarn supports downloading something from FTP, right? We should throw an error that untamper-my-lockfile doesn't know how to do FTP stuff yet.
Right. So I'm kind of, part of me is thinking, I need to look for the first at word character colon. And whatever's before that is going to be the package name.
Yes, and that's what I've done here. You can see the regex, and the regex is using named capture groups.
Yes.
So the only confusing thing is the thing might start with an @ for the scoped names, right? Then you have the @ before the scheme. I call it scheme like, HTTP, SSH, Git are all schemes. And then there's a colon, the first colon, and after that we just call it hierarchy in the URI RFC. And hierarchy would be like the full domain URL, or would be like,
Yeah. So in this case, then it just sounds like we wouldn't even need to really use NPA for the parse. I like that. I think that's great. Let's do it.
Yes, you would need to do this, and basically, if something we encounter a scheme that we don't know, we throw an error. Because untamper-my-lockfile. This is, by the way, a limitation that untamper-my-lockfile at the moment also has in the normal resolution. Like, we don't allow if someone uses a package directly from Git or from an HTTP URL.
Right.
It should be a feature request. And the patch thing here, I think it's very interesting. I looked at the log file of the web IDE thing. Maybe you should just, in the first iteration, whitelist, allow list the thing, the stuff that how do you call it? The stuff that Yarn does internally. I think they only patch resolve, FS events, and TypeScript. So it's like a limited list that we probably can hard code somehow.
Okay, that's a good point. I am planning on adding as an E2E input the web ID log file.
Yes.
The current one. I'm going to add that as part of the E2E thing. But this makes a lot of sense. And I get this. And it's nice that the only thing we're trying to do is just parse the package name. So I think that's a good point. And that's something to do. That makes sense. The other one thing I did want to highlight.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Let me highlight one thing. Because it makes sense. I don't know if you how much you read into it, but I found it to be a lot easier if when I'm parsing the Yarn log file, to then send to the validator, let's just get rid of all the workspace entries, because otherwise you're gonna need a whole bunch of like, oh, are we a workspace entry? We gotta allow it then. It's like I was going down that path. I was like, I need to just get rid of all these entries because there's no way to tamper them.
Yes, all good. Then this is like a valid solution for the workspace entries. But the other thing in the validation, you probably need to write like a switch case statement for the other protocols, right? And everything that's not part of the NPM workspace, NPM scheme, right?
Yeah.
Is basically, and the patch is probably invalid as in the first iteration, right?
Yeah. So that's I need to get that feedback by putting the whole. I knew I was doing this iteration, and then I know, okay, I need to try this against the whole thing. So I was excited to see that E2E thing. I'm gonna try that out, and then I know that's gonna get
already failed, by the way, with the patch thing. It already failed. Like, this is the reason why I looked at. Yeah. So one thing that you also should do, because I don't think you do it, but it's something that I encountered with version 1, that you basically need to do something like, oh, where's the alias thing? I always forget how to do it. It's poorly documented. npm install. Yeah, let me just, you have the example in the npm docs that you basically, do something like, I'm pasting it in a chat, that you do something like this in a maybe in the so that you do something like the second line, and just see how and add an end-to-end test with a log file that just has like the
that's a good point
thing.
Yeah, on a Yarn2 doing that's a good point.
Yeah, just how it looks, because it could be that we need to rethink a little bit how we do the thing. Yeah.
Test E2E with Yarn2 with alias.
Yes.
Yeah.
And just copy the npm install command, because nobody knows how to write them.
That's a good idea.
I only encountered the whole thing in real life when I started. I think in GitLab UI we have it now, because we install Vue 2 and Vue 3, or we install multiple versions of Bootstrap Vue.
This one's my favorite. Like, the only reason to do aliasing is if you need more jQuery. You got to have jQuery.
No, that's not true. The only reason to use aliasing is, and this is also something that we also maybe should test in a future iteration, or even in this iteration, is, I don't know if Yarn2 allows you to use this alias to, use Paul Slaughter's jQuery fork, and then, add Paul Slaughter / jQuery, and then, you being able to force override all the jQueries that are in your dependency tree with your fork, right?
This is, that's obviously, that's the long-term goal.
Yes. and there's another tiny thing that I said. Yarn versus one log files has an explicit array of optional dependencies, while Yarn2 just has like a meta tag and says, hey, this dependency is optional. So if you just go into your Yarn log file of the web IDE, you will, and search for optional, you will see it. Oh, I actually linked it. Did I link it? No.
Yeah, let me open it real fast.
Yeah, if you just search for optional, you can see it.
I see.
There are peer dependencies. That's interesting, because we should also look what to do with them. If you can tamper with them, that's a good follow-up, but you can also see that they're like optional dependencies, right?
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So what do you think is a good way to cover these? So I'm interested in wanting to get this working for Yarn v2, like get this integrated to the product as soon as possible. So to what scope are we interested in covering all of the Yarn v2 cases? And then
I think the first good iteration is
if you basic.
I think the first good iteration is if the thing passes for the web IDE, it's probably good enough for first iteration, and we couldn't call it a beta feature. And to be honest, like, I have all kinds of test cases inside the test files, where I dealt with, peer dependencies and bundle dependencies and all these kind of things. Maybe it makes more sense to move them to package JSONs again, and being able to generate like how the log files would look. You know what I mean? Like, to basically have the same end-to-end coverage for each case for Yarn1, Yarn2, and so on. Yeah.
That would be interesting. And that's a good point though too. I think I can copy a lot of the current ones and create a Yarn2 version of it and see what happens there. That's an interesting point.
I mean, once you have the first version and are satisfied, I'm also more than happy to try to break it by just adding more test cases, right? Like,
that's yep. That's what I was thinking. Let me ask you one more thing, and it sounds like you gotta maybe hop off.
Yes.
Family. The one thing I was gonna ask was, I noticed a part that looked at your package JSON. So it looks at the lock file, but also looks at the package JSON.
Did I do that?
Well, okay, maybe not. So that's what I would like to get some clarification on. Am I interpreting this correctly?
Yes. Let's just check.
Here.
Oh no, this is a little bit confusing. So the package is called package JSON, and it just retrieves the metadata from the registry. So the thing that does this is basically calling npm and getting back all the data from npm.
Yes. Okay, got it. For some reason, I thought it was reading the package. For some reason, I thought it was reading package JSON. All right, I'm glad it's not. Because of the workspaces, that would be a challenge, because we would have to read all of the workspaces package JSON if we were going to like map these entries.
We once did it. Like, we once scanned package JSON, and I tried, like, I threw like errors if a dependency was missing and these kind of things. And then I just realized this is dumb, because if you just do a yarn install, it will complain about missing dependencies anyhow, right? Like, so I mean, with untamper-my-lockfile, the only thing that we're really trying to cover, and this is also the reason why I didn't look into Yarn2, because I didn't use it enough, is like, you just try to cover the cases that Yarn versus 2 doesn't catch itself, right? Yes. So like if you ja, ein schöner Sticker. Ja, das ist ein Sticker. Yeah. So the only, like, if you have something that is like, the yarn immutable, And if you have a tempered log file that is like a yarn immutable that would raise an error, it's okay. Then
That's fine. We
then
don't have to recover that. Makes a lot of sense.
yes.
And so
yes.
on that note, this I wrestled with this a little bit, is that Yarn2 doesn't do the same integrity check as Yarn1, because Yarn2 saves everything in zip files. So it actually saves the checksum of the zip files, which is really kind of frustrating. But then when I tried, like, okay, can I tamper with this in any way? And you just can't. Like, doing yarn immutable is just going to, if the checksum doesn't match.
Basically the only way to tamper is you change the resolution and the hash at the same time.
Yes, which would work hatching resolution. So that would be why it should be fine. So
yeah. So basically the only thing that you check in the end with the Yarn2 version is that the resolution is as expected.
Yep. Yeah, basically.
Have you tried to tamper with a log file? Like, have you just changed?
I have. Yeah, you can change. You can do the typo squatting is the thing.
Okay.
So that's yeah. So cool. Thanks for taking a look at this. I really appreciate the quick feedback on it. And this is a good idea. So yeah, I'll go through this.
I'm just happy to see more contributions, because you're going to get like merge request in reverse.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I'm really eager to get because right now I have MRs closed on the web ID projects. I'm really eager to get those open because I feel bad that contributors aren't able to make contributions. So cool. Appreciate everything.
Cool. Thank you. Have a nice weekend. See
Take
ya.
care.
Bye.
Bye, Pien.